video is sponsored by Unve. And why should you get the opportunity to reincarnate? Well, I think I would be a great candidate for reincarnation because I want to get revenge on my unsuspecting family because I now have the upper hand of future knowledge. What other reasons do you have? We see that here day in and day out. Well, I'm not a poor. Great! We'll send you back immediately! To Whom It No Longer Concerns is one of Webtoon's newest reincarnation revenge comics, a genre I'm quickly growing to equate with terrible comics in my brain. Woo! I think if I was to pinpoint why these reincarnation revenge comics are so middling, it's most likely because for the plot to happen, the characters in the story have to act incredibly stupid. You want to know what I would do if I was reincarnated? No. I would make an Unveil account. Why? Unveil is a free-to-use platform for all artists, writers, and creators. Unveil is a site I have really come to love as it is a really great place to find new artists and get your own art discovered. A fun feature I like playing with is the random button. You can find art that was posted months ago, meaning you know the site is doing its best to keep individual pieces seen. On top of that, I personally enjoy the ease of organization the site offers as well. You can have a gallery of OC-specific artwork, you can list their traits as well as writing their lore and keeping your story consistent. A really cool feature that Unveil also offers is the world building feature. Here you can expand on the world you are writing about and even get more eyes on your artwork, which is super nice. I personally think the best thing about Unveil is the anti-AI artwork and never NFT policies they have in place as well. It's really important for artists not to have their work buried amongst all of these things, and with Unveil you get all of that and more for free. Use the code in the description to create your account today. And without further ado, let's get back to the video. Reincarnation revenge stories always open with a character who just got betrayed, giving us a song and dance about how they never knew the people they loved were bad and how they wish they could go back in time and change things. Followed by them being given that very opportunity by justice spirits, or the universe, or God, or whatever. But time and time again, each of these stories ends up being the character staying as close to the evil murdering family as they possibly can, even when given the opportunity to go elsewhere and live a happy life. This ends up leaving such a bad taste in my mouth, I can never really feel sympathy or root for the protagonist. To Whom It No Longer Concerns is an excellent example of my problems with this genre as a whole. The comic follows one of the world's dumbest female leads, Ariana, finding out that her wonderful, loving family is actually an evil family that hates her. Ariana learns this very suddenly one day as her brother Edward hits her with his car. Edward does this because Ariana had threatened to tell the world that he had been stealing her songs and passing them off as his. As Ariana is laying on the ground, dying, her husband Lucas and stepsister Elena get out of the car along with Edward and they talk to Ariana about how much they hate her. This news comes as a shock to Ariana because there were absolutely no warning signs, and Ariana thought her family loved her as she loved them. Whoa, hey, are you okay? Oh, this now? Yeah, that's just how my brother tells me he loves me. What? Love you too, big bro! Elena then drops a bomb on Ariana, telling her she's pregnant with Lucas's child. In Ariana's dying breaths, Edward uses her bloody thumbprint as a signature on a document to sign over all of her wealth to himself. You know, how signatures work. I've come to sign over all of my sister's wealth to me. Oh, I see. And are both parties here today? Oh, yes. We're both here. Okay. As Ariana lay dying, she thinks to herself that who knew they would betray her all along? I think everyone did, babe. You can't work at the mind collapsing factory and then get confused when minds start, you know, collapsing. She wishes to herself that she wants a second chance at life to not end up as roadkill, and miraculously her wish is granted. Awakening 5 years in the past, Ariana finds herself in the year 325. Within minutes of her arriving, Ariana quickly accepts the fact that she is now back in time and makes up her mind to get revenge on her family for all those most terrible things they have ever done to her. These terrible things, including, but not limited to, stealing the songs she had written, hitting her, verbally abusing her, hiding her memories somehow, stealing her fiance, telling her she's ugly, pushing her into the path of a rampaging horse, etc., etc. This dog randomly bit me and there were no signs! Sir, that's an alligator. No, he's a French bulldog miniature poodle taekwondo mix! Now, if you remember, Ariana had literally just got done telling us that she loved her family and never thought they would betray her. So when we jump back in time, I naturally assumed that everyone would be pretending to be super nice to her. All along, their disdain for her boiled under the surface. They were outwardly super nice to her, so they could profit off of her musical compositions. Obviously, that would make the most sense, considering how shocked she was that they murdered her. But Ariana wakes up and immediately, right off the bat, we are bombarded with example after example of how terribly they were treating her. Ariana literally walks in on Lucas and Elena openly flirting with each other and immediately comes to the conclusion that their affair started years ago. She then turns around and runs into Edward, who pretty immediately starts bombarding her with verbal insult after verbal insult. Like, it's really obvious that they are just using her and don't actually like her, which makes me feel like her character is just stupid and it doesn't really make me want to root for her in the first place. And look, I understand that growing up in a household that treats abusive acts as normal is definitely going to warp your perception of reality. But once you finally find yourself out of that household, seeing how others interact, you are going to go through a long questioning process of finding out what you experienced wasn't normal or safe. But in Ariana's case, she did not grow up spending her formative years with Edward and Elena abusing her. Ariana will constantly reminisce about how wonderfully her grandfather and mother treated her. So honestly, why would she think that then her treatment by these people was love? There's even a point where Ariana tells us that every time Edward got angry and hit her, she was reminded of how scary her father was. She can't then turn around and tell us she never saw anything coming. Like, girl, what are you talking about? The story can't have it both ways, where Ariana's absolutely shocked at their betrayal and then also has their family be so blatantly malicious.
Train approaching. Please remain behind yellow line.
A train? I wonder where it's going. So now Ariana has to escape her upcoming marriage to Lucas, but first she still wants to get revenge on her family for all of the awful things they had done to her. So within the first chapter, Ariana writes a new song called The Adulteress's Aria and tells Edward she can write an entire opera for Alina to sing, since Alina is an adulterer. She then plans to leave Lucas at the altar, steal an entire orchestra from Edward, steal back her songs, and marry a guy named Dante Heisenberg. Now, having read all of the chapters up on Webtoon, I wouldn't have been able to guess what Ariana was planning on in this first chapter. Not because she's so unpredictable, but because everyone insists that she is boring, naive, and stupid. I was given no reason to disbelieve the evil characters telling me this because she is those things. If Ariana herself couldn't tell they were planning on killing her, why should I trust and root for her when she is proven to be all those things in the first place? Ariana isn't a smart planner or overthinker, she just does things that end up working out because she's the female lead with plot armor. For example, when Ariana offers Edward's orchestra to come and work for her, they all immediately accept the job without asking any questions. None of these members asks Ariana to prove she was the original composer of the songs she had been playing. None of them even ask when or where they will start working for her if they go along working with her. Do you trust me? Do you have a 401k plan? So Ariana then goes to ask Dante Heisenberg for his hand in marriage. She does this by playing him a song on the kalimba. Dante is so impressed that he then offers her 5 billion Canada dollars for it. Cadena dollars, I'm sorry, everything keeps autocorrecting to Canada, so it's just gonna be Canada dollars. I just wanna play you a song. Ooh, yeah. Oh, wow. Whoa. I'll give you 5 billion Canada dollars for that song. Money? No one gets in this business for money. They get in it for love. Mwah, 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 mwah. But instead, Ariana just wants to marry Dante because unmarried women in their kingdom aren't allowed to have personal wealth. So she sees Dante as a great way to have her wealth and escape her engagement to Lucas. Ariana says she just needs to marry him for 1 year until she can figure out a way to protect herself from the law that would give Ariana's wealth and music copyrights to Edward. In return, Ariana promises to write music exclusively for Dante's music house. On the subject of Ariana writing music for this comic, it's pretty clear that the author has no idea what music is. I understand the author wanted something to set their story apart from other reincarnation stories by giving Ariana this natural-born music ability, but they had no idea what actually goes into composing music. I also have no idea what actually goes into composing music, but I know people that do. So, take it away, Bob. Tell us about the music. Da, 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 da. It's Bob.
Hi, my name is Bob Gabbitas. I'm a composer, conductor, and clarinetist. I graduated with a degree in music performance in 2024, and I consider myself someone who knows some stuff about music. In the music world, composing just means writing music. You can think of a composer as the artist that paints a picture, the sculptor that sculpts a statue, or the writer that writes a book. That's who the composer is for music. So they're the one that is creating the song. They're the one that's writing it down or recording it to be reproduced later by a computer or by real musicians. In this context, it looks like the composer here is living in a time before recording devices, so she's writing for actual musicians. And so in that context, a composer is responsible for knowing a lot of things about all the different instruments. So if she's writing for violins and flutes and trombones, it's important that she knows the limitations of those instruments, how many instruments she's going to have, and just creating a piece of music that they'll enjoy playing and that will sound nice to the audience. There's a lot of different approaches to writing music. There's not necessarily like a strict set of instructions or rules. And so that's kind of a fun thing because with so many possibilities, you get all these different kinds of music. And I think that's kind of an awesome thing about music in general, that it's just so diverse and you can make it in so many different ways. Writing for an orchestra is one of the hardest things to do as a composer. There's so many different players and so many different kinds of instruments that you have to really know a lot. And so to kind of find a good starting place that isn't super overwhelming, it's very common to work at a piano, especially in older times. Someone like Beethoven, when they're writing their symphonies, he didn't just pull out a piece of paper and write each of the parts and then hand them out to people. He likely would have written what's called a sketch, and he would have played it on the piano, written it down for a piano, and then once he kind of liked what he had on the piano, he would move those notes to different instruments, and that's a process called orchestration, and it's incredibly common and not out of place at all. It's something that I do all the time. Even if I don't necessarily play it at the piano, I'll write in a way that's simplified that could be played by the piano or maybe two people for a piano, and then listen to that back, and then later I'll move all that to the full orchestra. It's just a good way to simplify things because you have so many moving parts. You need a simple version of your song before you can make it that complex. It's very possible to be writing music at a young age, especially works like operas or symphonies. There's even quite a handful of composers you might know who got their start at 5 or 6. Mozart was in a touring group playing the harpsichord or the piano at a really young age. He was 6 or 7 and he was writing music around the same time. So there definitely have been composers in the past that do that sort of thing. It is remarkable. It isn't something that you just see every day, but kind of the bottom line is if your music is good, people will listen to it, people will want to play it. There is this interesting curse I do notice though, that people who get really popular at a young age don't always last their whole life through. Either they die young, like the case of Mozart, or just their music that they make later in life just doesn't get much more interesting, so people don't keep paying attention to it. So yeah, like definitely possible, definitely something that we see in real life and could happen. There's really no such thing as natural born talent when it comes to music. I think that's true with just about any skill, but even in music, you get good when you're exposed to music and you practice it. Some people are lucky enough to be born into families where they really value music, and so they expose it to you at a young age, and others just don't have that opportunity. And it doesn't always mean that you're going to have a fantastic career in music or that you're destined to be popular or successful. Two people that come to mind that I think are incredibly talented are Jacob Collier and and Charlie Puth. And while I personally enjoyed their music, it's not everyone's cup of tea. Like, they don't get this widespread, oh, everyone loves them, they're the best, just because they were super talented at a young age. You could certainly argue that to a degree, the more time you spend on your artistic skill, the less time you're spending in the real world, and so it makes your music just less meaningful. I know that a lot of people in school struggle with making music that just feels emotional because they're spending so much time in school around music that they forget to live life. And I've just kind of found that to be true with people who are naturally talented, especially people who were, big at a young age. Sometimes they just forget that music is an art form and music is meant to express emotions and feelings. And so if you don't spend time identifying those feelings and living life and, having chances to feel upset or to feel happy, your music doesn't always come across as meaningful or all that emotional or interesting. So yeah, to me, I'm not necessarily anti-talent, but there is definitely a lot of hard work and a lot of experience that you have to have, regardless if you're talented or not, if you want to be a successful musician and if you want to create music that is interesting and is worthwhile.
To add on to that, the author constantly tries to tell us that Ariana is just musically talented. There are countless scenes where people tell Ariana she is musically gifted. That is all fine and good. But, as many of you know, just being gifted or naturally talented will only get you so far. But continuously, we are told that Ariana was just born perfect and that Edward can never be as talented as she is no matter how hard he tries. But because of this, I just see Ariana as a flawless Mary Sue who never had to work for anything. As someone who knows how it feels to have spent time learning how to play an instrument, I can't begin to count the nights I've spent playing and practicing. Ariana's natural born talent just makes her feel less like a person and more like a perfect little angel descended from heaven to be bland and uninteresting. In making her this perfect prodigy, they've actually set up Edward as the more interesting character, as he's had to work, even if it's through nefarious means, to accomplish anything in his life. You might be wondering what some of Ariana's music sounds like. Well, Bob was kind enough to put the written music to audio for us. Here is what the Adulteress's aria sounds like. That was pretty good. How about we listen to Ariana's song called Possession? That sounds pretty similar to the Adulteress's aria. No matter, let's take a look at this song Alina is singing. Is that the same song? That's weird. Honestly, I can't even be mad. These music notes just seem to be an asset, and Bob pointed out that it's actually really rare for drawn music to be legible for a musician in the first place, so good job, comic. We were also lucky enough to find sheet music that sounds pretty cute too. In chapter 29, we finally get an entire page of sheet music. Let's take a listen. Honestly, I kinda like it. I even tried seeing if the sheet music was copied from another song, but I couldn't find anything of a similar tune, so I think the artist wrote their own sheet music, which is a really nice touch if it is true. While the music that is drawn for certain chapters seems to be a stylistic choice on the artist end, there are a lot of other parts of the comic where characters talk about natural-born talent the main lead has and how everything Ariana does is perfect. But when it's time to actually talk about the music, characters will throw around random buzzwords that sound music-y enough to fool an audience. I'm honestly torn between thinking the author has a background in music or not, because while some things seem more than surface level, others seem a little bit less knowledgeable. Music aside, Dante accepts Ariana's proposal, but only on the condition that she acts like she really likes him, which I don't know, it seems kind of fair at this point. Ariana finds this acceptable and the pair agreed to be wed after Ariana gets some revenge on her family first. While Ariana doesn't seem to want to sleep with Dante, she tells us that she knows he's impotent based on some rumors from her past life. Dante is later revealed not to be impotent. Honestly, I do want to give props to this comic where it's due. The fact that they both agreed to marriage knowing Ariana only wants revenge on her family is pretty good, in my opinion. There are no cheap or or stupid misunderstandings that further the plot, aside from the impotence thing, which I just kind of find more or less funny. We also get some quiet moments between the pair where Ariana will notice he stays up late, so she goes to play music for him. Dante will tell Ariana she can rely on him instead of only having to rely on herself. All things aside, I do think that the romance is relatively well paced, and then things get ruined when it's paired with Dante's face. I'm sorry, but something about him makes my lizard brain unhappy. He looks so weird. Maybe it's because he vaguely looks like a jerk I used to date.
Well, maybe it's just because you're ugly.
It's on site with him in the room. I'm sorry, babes. I'm just a superficial lady. As Ariana goes about her plans, the story pretty desperately wants us to think of her as a powerful boss babe that can overcome any obstacle with her natural beauty, talent, and brains. But genuinely, the only time I have ever seen Ariana do anything that won't directly benefit her is when she went to play one song for Dante. From everything I've seen of Ariana, she's basically just shown to use those around her for her own personal gain. For example, Ariana wants to find a voice that is better than Elena's to sing her songs. She immediately stumbles upon a girl named Rosalind. Rosalind is crying because her piano accompanist suddenly disappeared, leaving her with no one to play the piano while she sings for her first performance. Ariana then tells Rosalind she'll play the piano for Rosalind's first singing performance. On its face, this is seemingly a kind act. While I understand it does benefit Rosalind, Ariana only offered to help knowing she could gain something from this interaction. I plan to utterly ruin both the Lopez opera and my family to the extent that they won't be able to dream of reclaiming their former glory. The music I create will be my weapon for accomplishing that, but no matter how good the music is, it can't be appreciated if it only remains on paper. In that aspect, Elena was an excellent soprano. In 5 years, she would grow to be the best soprano in the entire empire. Even now, she has no rivals, except one. Had Rosalind not been a good enough soprano, Ariana would have never agreed to help her. But, you know, it's a comic, it's a webtoon, so with Rosalind by her side, Ariana now has a singer who can outperform Elena. In another instance, we are told that Princess Katerina has wanted to marry Dante for quite some time. But upon finding out Dante has fallen in love with Ariana, she goes to confront Ariana. Here, Ariana lays on the flattery in order to take Katerina off her guard and no longer be angry at Ariana for stealing her man. Katerina is an artist and designs patterns as well as exhibits paintings in galleries. Ariana tells us she knows Katerina appreciates flattery and specifically uses it in her favor. While she turns around and tells us she actually likes Katerina's art, she still specifically said these things to benefit herself. And again, I wouldn't mind her doing these things if we weren't then told that Ariana is a pure and virtuous person. I promise, Webtoon, I promise people will still like a story even if the main character is a little questionable. Please, Webtoon, give me a questionable lead, please. Now, only 35 chapters out, we do get glimpses of an overarching theme of the comic that revenge is bad. Dante tells Ariana that revenge can eat you alive, and Ariana will occasionally think to us about how she wonders what fulfilling revenge will feel like. It's not by any means the most complex thought, but opening a story with the character out for revenge and then giving a reason to question whether or not they should actually go through with that is a great opportunity for a character arc. But then we are never shown any examples of revenge being in any way negative for Ariana or it having any effect on her. You shouldn't introduce a theme and then throw it out when it goes against what you want your characters to be doing. Usually a revenge-themed story will go one of two ways. A, showing us revenge is good, or B, showing us that revenge is bad. Let's use Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, for example. Spoilers for the next few minutes. I will put a time skip for you to jump to if that's what you like, so have at it. At the end of Breaking Bad, Walter White goes to get revenge on Jack Welker and his gang of Nazis for stealing his money, enslaving Jesse, and, you know, countless other acts. This is framed in a pretty positive light because Well, the people he killed are Nazis. While Walter and the Nazis are both pretty horrible and irredeemable people throughout the entirety of the show, the Nazis are actively torturing Jesse and have murdered countless people, including a literal child. Walt is overwhelmingly outnumbered and has no idea if his plan will actually work in achieving his goal of revenge. So when his plan succeeds, it feels like a victory, the underdog overcoming impossible odds to save the day. You're not supposed to look at it as another one of the horrible acts of Walter White. You're, at least in my opinion, supposed to look at it as a mostly positive act on Walt's part. In Breaking Bad's prequel series, Better Call Saul, the latter half of the show is focused on Jimmy and Kim getting revenge on their former boss, Howard Hamlin, and it's pretty clear that the show is full on condemning their actions. So, what is the difference between revenge on Howard Hamlin versus revenge on the Nazis? Well, for one thing, Howard Hamlin is not a Nazi. While he does some pretty asshole-ish things throughout the show to screw Kim and Jimmy over, he wasn't torturing and killing people. Secondly, Kim and Jimmy have complete 100% control over the situation with Howard. Walt showing up to kill Jack Welker and his gang is seen as good and impressive because he was largely outnumbered by him, so it feels like a win for an underdog. But with Jimmy and Kim, they outnumber Howard Hamlin and pretty effortlessly run circles around him, making their revenge against him feel unnecessary and overly aggressive. Okay, so what does this have to do with these revenge/reincarnation comics, you might be wondering? Well, stories like these constantly try to set up a Jack Welker-like villain by opening the story with them brutally killing the female lead. But then they accidentally make the villain a Howard Hamlin type of villain by having the female lead go back in time to before they've actually done anything irredeemable. Or most of the irredeemable stuff, I don't know, it depends. Now the boss babe can no longer be beaten in any meaningful way and holds all of the cards, and the villain is just left to slowly and pathetically spin out and ultimately fail. Now, seeing as how Better Call Saul, an excellent show, does this, that does not mean it is a sign of bad writing. However, a good bit into the final season, the writers of Better Call Saul, at least presumably, want you to be rooting for Hamlin, at least a little bit. They show you his troubled marriage and how what Kim and Jimmy are doing to him is really getting to him and fucking him over. When he ends up defeated, you're not meant to say, oh look, our clever heroes have defeated the villain. If the webtoon is just chapter after chapter of our hero punishing dickwad characters for actions they have not yet committed, effortlessly outsmarting them, it doesn't feel quite as deserved, even if said dickwad characters should be getting taken down a notch. A really, really good example of this trope is the comic My In-Laws Are Obsessed With Me. Parashati gets murdered by her evil family and later wakes up back in time. She doesn't immediately think that what she saw was true. It takes a while before she realizes that she really is in danger. The family she loves still treats her in the same loving way they always had. So Parashati truly doesn't know if her past life was real or not. Rather than going on a revenge-fueled rampage for things that technically haven't happened yet, Parashati runs away, leaving herself wondering if she made the right decision since her seemingly loving family hasn't actually done anything. To Whom It No Longer Concerns is a typical reincarnation/revenge/love story, except for whatever reason, I kinda despise Ariana. I understand she does things that end up benefiting her in the long run, but what if her family was actually smart and not just stupid villain stereotypes? What if her actions caused her to not actually know what would happen in the future? We literally see she has unreliable knowledge based on the rumors from her past life. Ariana incorrectly assumes Dante is impotent. Why should we trust her? Another pretty big reason I dislike Ariana is the fact that she's a pretty classist individual. One of the things she says about Elena is that having a commoner mother has always been her biggest weakness. But honestly, we are given no reason to actually understand why it's a weakness other than the fact that people use it as an insult towards Elena. The line just came so out of nowhere, I couldn't brush past it since our main lead was supposed to be this kind and virtuous lady. I heard she doesn't even inherit her own money. She had to work for it like a poor. Ew! Did you guys know her mom volunteers at the animal shelter walking underprivileged handicapped dogs? Ew! So anyways, let's go get Botox and caviar coffees. Yay! Yay! I personally have a grievance against comics like this when the character doesn't try to run away immediately. There's literally nothing keeping the female lead where she is other than the vague excuse for revenge and not wanting to be a poor. You're telling me that in this vaguely English country, you can't just disappear into the countryside to live out your days peacefully? Well, here, Ariana tells us that unmarried women can't own any kind of personal wealth, which seems like a really great call to action for our main lead. Maybe through the power of her music, which we as an audience have been told is widely respected in her land, she can help lead a movement that gives women more rights. I'd be down for a girl boss comic like that. There's actually an anime called Carolyn Tuesday that has a premise similar to this, where a pair of young girls use their music to help calm the unsteady political issues their planet is going through. If Ariana had to spur a women's rights revolution so no one had to suffer what she had, that would honestly be a really iconic story. But no, because Ariana doesn't want to become a poor, she stays pretty damn close to her bad situation in order to end up with her songs and be wealthy in the end. I understand wanting money, I get it, I get it, I want money too, girl, but I also think that wanting to live is more important than wanting money. When characters like this don't end up running away, it makes them seem as if they don't value themselves. And if the main character doesn't value themselves, why should I? I got a comment a while ago that I was being too harsh on characters because in their times, women aren't allowed to have rights. I will say this comic was interesting to me because I don't think I have read a single webtoon like this that takes place in a real time or place. So with the made up rules of these places that are pretty similar to moments in human history, why not make a women's suffrage story? Wouldn't it be so much more impactful to read about a character that grows in power as the comic goes on and actually uses that power for good? As a reader, I have absolutely no use for these stupid made-up political rules that in the end don't actually matter to the main character. I feel like most comics in this genre end up with their main character becoming queen, empress, duchess, whatever, and while they're the most high woman in the land, they then don't try to do anything to overthrow the terrible system they found themselves in. In story, they've gained a ton of political and social power, and failing to use it in a way to help people in similar or worse situations kinda adds to the whole feeling of classism and whatnot. Because if the now powerful characters don't do anything to help others in their situation in the end, are they really that good of a person as the story wants us to believe? Listen, I am a slut for historical comics. I think there are so many fantastic ways to make history fun, and this is a great example of doing so. Imagine how cool a magical woman suffrage story would be. You then also have a really great antagonist for your story, being built-in misogyny. Since these stories are already hell-bent on adding a rapist or misogynistic character, this is the time and place for it. A commentary on how restrictive laws affect everyone in this land and how things could be better for every gender if they just didn't follow laws like that. Like maybe talking about how important change like this takes time. I don't know. It just seems like a pretty good idea, if you ask me. But instead, we're given a pretty by-the-numbers comic about a girl who wants to get her music back. Now, if I'm being totally honest, the comic isn't completely awful. There are some interactions and characters I find appealing. The artist even drew this horse? That's a first! But I can't help but see the missed potential here, where Ariana really could have been a role model for other women in her land, country, I don't know where they are, an empire. I really find her character to be pretty unremarkable, just as her family had initially described her to us. Maybe I'm just sick of reincarnation stories. They really seem to take a lot out of a story and tend to leave the leads feeling too overpowered and knowledgeable. Because it's really easy to look back and say what you would change in life so that you could have a better outcome for yourself. I think a lot of us, if we went back in time 10 years, would make investments and save up for houses while we were young and didn't have to pay bills every month like we do now. But part of life is sticking to the decisions you've made and living with those decisions as best you can. Making the best of tough decisions makes the journey you've gone through all the more sweet and fulfilling. None of us would be the person we are today had we just pressed the reset button every time we failed. Webtoon reincarnations are like that part of the movie Groundhog Day where Phil keeps going back in time to go on the same date with Rita over and over again trying to get it perfect, which is ultimately shown to be like a weird manipulative bad thing. But instead of being one part of a movie about a character learning to be a good person, it was a whole comic where they just kind of let Phil win the date. I think in the end that's part of the reason I despise Ariana's character so much. Ariana isn't a person like you or me. She never really had to work through her problems. She just had prior knowledge of what was going to happen for the next 5 years. Ariana didn't have to look through countless men in order to find Dante. She just got lucky enough to marry the right guy who wants to treat her nicely. She didn't have to spend years and years perfecting her musical talents. She was just born with it. And most importantly, Ariana never had to work for her money. She just wasn't born a commoner. Thank you so much to my patrons Izama, Roses and Water, Lady Outpossum, Nowhere to Xander, Icy, TJ, Menti Williams, Char, Mira, Meep Cubed, Eelheart, Bella Noggle, Salo Sketch, Anna the Giant, Abigail, Selena Beebe, Fatim Liskovsky, To My Ears, and Claudia E. Gomez. If you would also like your name read aloud at the end of my videos and get early access to videos as well as Patreon exclusive goodies, you can join my Patreon for only $2 a month. Don't forget to check out Unveil on your way out as well.